Hey, Margo, welcome to Work Life. I'm so glad you could join us today.
Eric, thank you for having me.
It's exciting. I know you reached out. You had heard one of my other podcasts and said, I'd love to be a guest on the show. And I said, this sounds like a kind of person that I'd love to have on the Work Life program. So I'm really glad that you reached out and I'm interested to learn more about your story. So as we kind of kick things off here today, I'd love it if you could just share a little bit about your background and how you got into coaching.
Sure. My professional background was in human resources.
Okay.
Did everything from, the recruiting, employee relations. I ended up as head of HR for a couple of different firms. So that's my background. Did a lot of training, leadership development, and in the last couple of gigs, was really working with the executive team, coaching them on how to be leaders, worked with a lot of the middle level managers. And my motto has always been that every employee deserves to work for a great manager, a great leader. And so I spent the majority of my professional career helping to grow those managers.
Do you find managers are receptive to being trained, to being taught new things?
Absolutely, because they not only know that their experience coming up through the ranks hasn't always had good role models. And so they know that rather than trying to imitate somebody who doesn't inspire them, is not as probably even more challenging than just trying to develop leadership skills on their own. So when I left the corporate world, I got my stripe, I got my professional coaching credential, and I've been working with mid-level managers, mostly senior leaders, those managers who manage other managers inside organizations. I find that's my sweet spot. It also is an underserved arena, I believe. There's lots of organizations that have first level supervisory training for when somebody's first going into a supervisory role. And they'll send their execs off to very expensive training programs. But those middle level managers, the ones who are really in the trenches with their people and communicating the message from the top, they're the ones that don't have that skill building, that training, that leadership development.
You know, I spent many years in the corporate world going through the ranks, and it amazes me when I look back, there was very little leadership training as part of that. You kind of progressed in your job, you got promotions, you started to get employees that worked for you, but most companies don't seem to spend a lot of time and effort really training their leaders.
Yeah, which is a shame because, we all have heard the Gallup polls, right? 80% of our current employees are disengaged, dissatisfied with their roles. They're just going in and, doing their time at their job instead of feeling inspired by their leaders, their organizations, and really giving their best. So we're leaving a lot of potential on the table, I believe.
Why do you think it's so hard to take what is in all of these great leadership books? I mean, there are so many good books out there on leadership. Why do you think it's so hard for people to put it into practice?
Well, it takes courage, it takes vulnerability, it takes humility and integrity. Things that, in my experience, a lot of people who have worked their way up the ladder haven't seen demonstrated and don't know how to tap into that for themselves. So if you're not self-aware, if you don't know how other people are viewing you, then it's hard for you to make adjustments. It's hard for you to change your approach and show up differently. And that's really, in my experience, what it takes is somebody's willingness to say, I want to show up as my best self. I want to not only live my best life, but create an environment where my employees can live up to their potential and be their best selves as well. And that's a really different mindset than is inside most corporate organizations these days.
Well, it seems like things keep changing too. You know, you watch TV shows from the 60s and 70s, and you look at office environments and what it meant to be the boss who had the corner office and his boss's boss. And, it's very different. now we just went through the COVID pandemic where so many people were working from home. And that certainly challenged people to lead in new ways that not many people had experience in.
Again, a very big challenge for people who were used to the hierarchical paternal type of organizational structure that I believe is still in place in many large organizations. So it takes somebody, again, courage to say, I think there's a better way, or I've seen it, I believe, I hope, I imagine there's a different way to interact with your employees, to build relationships with people, find out what really motivates them, what it is that they want, what it is that they need, and then create a space where they can work to and show off their best skills, their best abilities, and really contribute to the organization in ways that currently aren't available to them.
Oftentimes when you get leadership roles in an organization, you start to manage people who are younger than you, maybe who are a generation younger than you, who are working their way up the ladder. And one thing that I'm sure you notice as well is that leading people of a different generation can be challenging, right? The way they think, what's important to them can be very different than the way you think or what's important to you.
Absolutely, which is why it's so important to build those relationships, to ask those questions. What is it that you want out of this? And how can I help? One of the things I always used to do with my employees was talk about, so where do you want to be 6 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now? Because I'm in a position to help you get there. Mm-hmm. And it's a partnership that, if you do the things that I need you to do now, I'll create opportunities where you can stretch your wings in these other areas, get some experience, perhaps cross-functionally or what have you, so that you're ready to make that move when you want to make that move. And again, those aren't conversations that are necessarily always being held. I would do training sessions and all, helping to inspire the managers in our organization to do the same with their employees. And, slowly but surely it starts to make an impact.
I think when you wrote me the message, you talked about this idea of busy being the new lazy. Is that how you framed it? What do you mean by that?
Yes. So, I chose the word lazy very intentionally because it's a charged word. It implies idleness and lack of action. There's, a real negativity there. And because you're putting things off, you're procrastinating, you're avoiding something. But I believe that the opposite is also true, that being crazy busy, overscheduled, and overcommitted can be a form of procrastination and avoidance as well. So my work on the topic came about because I was really looking for answers for myself and how I had gotten so out of whack.
Well, that's interesting. We love to talk on this show sort of about the personal side too. And, have you seen real changes in your work ethic and how you approach your work and how you schedule your day in your own personal life as the pandemic has set in and we've all had to make some adjustments?
Oh, absolutely. And let me tell you, I'm on a journey, my own path to getting to the place where I am now, where I'm not feeling like I'm crazy busy and overscheduled and, running on that hamster wheel, but not getting anywhere, has taken, a number of years to find a place where I am right now, where I am living the life that I created for myself, where I can work location, it's not location specific. I'm up here, you can probably see my background. I'm in a trailer in the mountains as we're building a little cabin up here on some property in Northern California. I also have a home on the coast, on the central coast of California, where my beach house. And then I spend a lot of time in the San Diego area because that's where my mom and my daughter live. So wherever I am, I can work, I can do what I love doing, but it took a while to get here. I had to be very intentional about it. And I think that's probably the one theme that has been the most prevalent during this last 18 months or so, is just being mindful and intentional about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and being able to say no to the other things that no longer serve me or no longer get me excited or no longer really feed my passion.
Interesting. When I think back about my earlier career days, in some ways it was like a bumper car, right? You just kind of reacted to being bumped and you kind of went different directions, but there wasn't a lot of intentionality to it. And then as you get a little older, more matured, you find out what you like and what you really want out of life. Then that intention really steps in. Have you found the same?
Yes, and I also had to hit a rock bottom. I was one of those people who, well, and I'll ask you, maybe you've said this to yourself or somebody who has said that, I'm so crazy busy. There's so much to do and never enough time. Or maybe it's that hamster wheel that you feel like you're on. You're running and not getting anywhere. And this is the sad part that for me was, is this all there is? I've worked so hard all my life to get what I thought I wanted and needed. Now that I've gotten it, is this all there is? Yeah. Well, I struggled with all three of those questions. And, I was always at work. I was never home. And when I was exhausted.
Yeah.
And I would tell you on the one hand that my family was the most important thing to me. But if you looked at my calendar, if you looked at how I was spending my time and where I was spending my time, it wasn't at home.
Sure.
Now, I really loved my job. I was really good at it. It funded my lifestyle. I had the nannies and the private schools and the Hawaiian vacations every year. And I was among other people who were also very successful and making a lot of money at what they did. And we would sometimes have these conversations about who was busier. And and like the person who was most sleep deprived was the winner. It was insanity. And I finally got to a point where my son was going to be going off to college. My daughter was going to be going off to high school. And it was like, how did that happen? Yes. I'm not done being a parent here. And yet my kids are, going to be going. So I took a step back and said, I have to do something differently. I know that everybody I know is on this crazy ride. And I see them as burned out as I am. And the situation isn't going to change. I have to change. I had been wearing my busy as like a badge of honor about see how important I am, see how successful I am, see, how accomplished I am. But what I really wanted was time with my family. And so I started having to make some changes. I had to make the changes in order to change my life. It wasn't going to happen around me. So that's sort of how this whole idea of lazy is the new busy is the new lazy came about, because my busyness was a form of avoiding and procrastinating and dealing with the things that I knew I would have to change in my life in order to get back on track. And so I equated busy with lazy, and hence the title.
No, I get it. And, it's very interesting to me because I used to do a lot of work with financial services. Oh, also we're getting really bad echo.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, just turn down your sound. It may have popped up there.
Okay.
Yeah, so much better. We used to do a lot of work with financial services firms, and I remember thinking the same thing inside many of these large banks, which had many layers, is people did wear their busyness as a form of honor. If you couldn't get on their calendar for a week, it was almost like they patted themselves on the back. Look at you, you're so busy, they have to wait a week to see me. And it was crazy.
Yeah. It's like a status symbol or something, and it's totally upside down.
But it's so freeing when you start to clear things off your calendar, when you start to take those tasks that you hate doing. Maybe you hate mowing the lawn. Well, then hire somebody to mow the lawn. Find a way to sort of get that into your budget so that just doesn't become, a boat anchor around your neck that you're constantly procrastinating on. Get rid of it. Just move along. Yeah. So what you've got these multiple places in multiple cities. What does that mean you like to do for fun?
Well, we love to travel. So although we didn't do any traveling last year, this year we're off to Hawaii for the month of September. It's going to be
for a whole month,
And then next year we're off to Spain. I have a sister who lives in Madrid, and so we're visiting her and doing some traveling around Europe next year. So yeah, That's probably my favorite thing to do outside of home. Home is, cooking. That's my sport. I love to throw dinner parties now that people are gathering again, and try and outdo myself from the time before. So that's how I amuse myself.
It's funny, when things started to open up, people were so eager to get together, but I noticed how stiff it was, how people really suffered, like trying to find good things to connect with others on. Did you get the Pfizer or the Moderna? People were talking about that as if that was interesting conversation. And now that, people have a few social gatherings under their belt, it really feels like people are easing up and getting more comfortable with that socialization again. But boy, is there a hunger for it right now.
Yeah. And actually, I'm seeing a little bit of a dip with all of the variants coming up.
Sure.
And I've heard of a new one from Peru, the Lambda virus. And it's still scary. It's still very scary. And although up here in the mountains, we're mask free because we don't have anybody around us. But when I go into town, we go into the grocery stores, I'm still masking up, you know?
Yeah. Just to be safe.
Yep.
So I'm curious, now that you have this coaching career, you're an entrepreneur, right? You're out there running your own business. How has it been being an entrepreneur compared to being an HR corporate person? That's a very different world.
It's terrifying. I used to have a line outside my door, people waiting to come talk to me, right? And I'd go in. Okay, never went in early. That's a lie. I'd stay late. Because there was always people wanting to chat. Now I have to, in many cases, go out and find people to talk to. That's a big switch for me.
Yes.
So I've been very fortunate. A lot of my clients come from referrals. But there's still that marketing and that sales thing that I have to embrace as an entrepreneur that don't come naturally to me. And so it's all about my own mindset, because I used to say, I don't sell. The reality was I was selling all the time. I was selling our company culture. I was selling opportunity. I was selling, all of that. I was selling. But in my mind, somehow that was different than selling, my own business. So it's really about helping to get to a place in your own head where you're okay. And in fact, wanting to have conversations about what you do because you can help people. In my business, I work, like I said, with mostly managers who manage other managers. And while we start off talking about a challenge that they're having at work, either in a relationship or with a subordinate or a conflict situation, whatever, ultimately we come around to talking about relationships, their relationships at work, their relationships at home, and how those impact what they're doing and how they're doing it, and ultimately how they want to show up as the best version of themselves as possible.
Yeah, I love that. And you're so right about being an entrepreneur and having to sell yourself. We've always been told not to be boastful, right? You don't want to be modest. And it was easy if you worked for another company, you could talk about your company or your products or your services. That was fine, right? But talking about yourself is definitely something that people have to get in the mindset of. It's
right.
Not
or once a year, you'd toot your own horn at your performance evaluation.
Right. But that was about it, right? So it is
Right.
a very different kind of thing once you get into the entrepreneurial world. Well, I think it's easy, and I love the way you've sort of framed this current state that we're in about busy being the new lazy. Are you going to do something with that? Are you going to write a book?
Well, it's kind of turning into that. It didn't start out that way. Again, it started out as a self-help project on myself, but as I've written about it, as I've researched it, and as I dig deeper into it, I've got a ton of material. And so, it kind of
moving that way.
Turned out to be a book.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Every time I say that to my coach, it's like, okay, by when?
Right.
By when?
Those accountability coaches, right? They hold your feet to the fire.
Indeed,
Well,
that's what we do.
well, hey, Margo, we will wait for that with bated breath. So, but for now, I'd love it if you could just tell people where they could find out more about you and the coaching services that you offer.
Absolutely. My website is www.greatleadercoaching.com. And I would be happy to chat with anybody who is looking to take bolder action, to hold themselves, to a dream and make it happen. And anyone who is, again, looking to show up as their best selves, either in their role, in their job, at home, whatever. Those are the folks that I work with that I enjoy having really powerful conversations with.
Ah, that's great. We all want to be our best selves, right? But sometimes it takes a little help to get there. Hey, Margo, I
Sometimes
really. Oh,
yeah,
go ahead. Go
sometimes
ahead.
you just need a mirror, to help you see yourself the way other people are seeing you.
Yeah, I always say I can help other people with their golf swing, but I can't golf. So,
That's a really good analogy because that's what it is. We get so wrapped up in the doing that it's hard to step back and really see yourself from the outside, the way other people see you. So yeah, good analogy.
very true. Well, listen, I will make sure that we have all that linked up in the show notes so that people can find you. I really appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing a little bit of your story with us. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.